am NetMoverSitan. Welcome back to the urban legend lore breakdown. Yeah, we're halfway through this one. But it could have been longer. Believe me, it could be. Next we have the all-around helper. Now this robot was made by X Incorporated, formerly known as XX Corp. Just needs one more X to it to sound something pornographic. You know those Roombas, or whatever you want to call those robot vacuum cleaners that are seen as taxis to domestic house cats? They're like that, except they don't just clean the floors, they also make hot beverages. There's one within the library that would like that. They also prepare food. Unfortunately, the cleaning implements were switched with the blades, so when it was on cleaning mode, it ended up killing the occupants of the house. In the facility, it charged across the room, damaging any in its way, before stopping for a short time before repeating this behavior. Brought to you by the same company that brought us We Can Change Anything, an Iron Maiden-like device that's intended to improve the user of it, but in reality, it gives them a slow and painful death. Now, most abnormalities had a risk of death. This was guaranteed death. In our world, this would be grounds for a legal case. But in that world, if you can't hire a decent fixer, you've got all chance of getting compensation for this. Never mind prison time for whoever came up with the decision to put this on sale. As for the library, the all-around helper is different, and not just because there's 3 of them. The all-around helper is a robot that was clearly designed in accordance of the AI ethics amendments, so there's no confusing it for human, and luckily has a similar level of intelligence as a domestic dog. Eager to help its owner, unaware that its idea of taking out the trash is a little different to what it's supposed to be doing. As for what Yasud's take on this is, he's unsure if it was due to a malfunction or due to the malice of its creators. Yasud, I don't think that the cleaning implements and the cooking implements can be switched around like that by accident. His assistant, on the other hand, was much less serious, thinking that it was cute. Yet they usually are, until they kill you. There are quite a few abnormalities that are like that. The stage of the all-around helper looks like a minimalist home. Bright white all round. Specifically the kitchen part, along with everything that should be there, except all the bloodstains. That was the result of its cleaning cycle. Well, if that didn't kill them, the food poisoned by the cleaning products certainly would. Anyone think that the designer of these was a petty and vindictive that wanted to test them out so they could market them as infiltration and or assassin robots? Sorry, I don't know why I said it like that. Oh wait, I do. I think you do as well. If you don't, please watch The Terminator. After defeating this abnormality, the flaw of technological sciences gains its power to utilize for future battles. After taking care of those killer robots, Roland delivered more books to Yasud and tidied up his clothes in advance this time, possibly so that he doesn't think that he's trying to annoy him on purpose. Yasud still referred to him as Angela's lapdog, but he was willing to talk to him about the technologies in the backstreets. They were interwoven in a disorderly manner. Well, it's a disorderly environment where the syndicates are basically the ones allowed to run things. At least in parts where fixers can't be hired. Examples are equipment made from junk. Yeah, clearly they take recycling more seriously in that world. And clothes woven from antimatter? I'm guessing that's somehow converted into matter or treated in such a way that it doesn't kill the wearer. As we know what happens when matter and antimatter collide with each other. Well, there's certainly quite a bit of technological advancement. As for what Roland thinks of this, well, he certainly understood enough to know that it's out there. Well, that much is obvious, but very few actually benefit from it, as in those that can afford to pay for it. Well, let me put it into perspective. According to Roland, the rich don't have to worry about disease. No mention about the poor if they get sick. They'd likely get tired from their job because they didn't want it enough to risk other lives in order to support themselves. Yeah, what good is medical treatment that can cure whatever you need curing if you can't pay for it? Then Roland started talking about singularities. Ooh, that's something that Yasud is all too familiar with, considering his history. Roland asked what the Bosme Corporation's singularity was, seeing as a legal threat wasn't something to fear at that point. I mentioned what it might be in the Bosme Corporation law breakdown, and I'll tell you what it is, at least according to Yasud. And according to Yasud, even though Roland was shameless, and Yasud was treating him like an idiot, well, compared to Yasud, he probably is. It was physically manifesting the human mind, an abstract concept. Part of that was converting human emotions into physical energy. Yeah, that's how I suspected it worked. The problem with that was, some are stronger than others, and not all can withstand it. The library operates in much the same way, which is why machines were useless for extracting that energy and other things that was needed, as they lacked human emotions. That would have been good for Chissa to know. Anyway, Yasud saw human emotions as a complex mass, built up through experiences, and when strong enough, it would create a page and a spot would be reserved for a person's book, which is a comprehensive manifestation of their ego. As the battle becomes fiercer and they get agitated, it grows more intense and allows for their mental states to be physically expressed. Which is basically describing how the emotions of the guests are heightened when in battle, which increases the chances of specific books with useful pages appearing. Yeah, an in-universe explanation of emotion levels. Roland saw this physical manifestation of the mind as similar to the distortion, although he wasn't paying much attention to Yesod while thinking about this. But he did tell Yesod that he was impressed by that singularity. He then asked Yesod about the project that was intended to save humanity that Malkuth spoke of. Yesod confirmed this, and no, Roland, it wasn't about to make money rain down from the sky, as that would only provide temporary relief at best and hasten the problem at worst. And Yesod was offended by him taking lightly their sacrifices. He then explained that they sought to cure the mind, or more specifically, the disease of the soul. They followed Carmen, who was the leader of their research team. Seeing that everyone in that city had a diseased mind, although some had a resistance to it, if not a natural immunity to it, like her, for example. But they still had it. Think Typhoid Mary. While she wasn't affected by the disease within her, others were. In fact, it was a situation so severe that humanity would slowly lead itself to self-destruction at this rate. In fact, it was compared to a situation similar to lemmings willingly jumping into a pit of fire. I doubt that a blocker would prevent that from happening, especially not in a 3D plane. What did Roland think of this? Well, he compared her to a shady cult leader. Yesod was not impressed with him taking him for a fool, as unlike them, there was enough proof to prove that it was the case. And he's looking at it. Roland then asked if they were successful. Okay. I can understand why Yesod was annoyed at Roland for asking such a stupid question, as they wouldn't be in that situation if they were. Although it wasn't the fact that they failed to save humanity that upset him the most. They had to commit countless sins in order to even try to do so, convincing themselves that they had no other choice. So Angela was using your lines. Couldn't you think of anything more original than that? Well, in this case, it involved unethical experiments and knowingly driving employees to death. That was certainly the case with two that was a part of the facility. Tolerated for a greater good. I honestly shouldn't be surprised by that excuse. It's used to justify, well, quite a few things, no matter how questionable or immoral. But I can understand why he did that. Then again, it was all for nothing. All the pain that they endured. All because of Angela ruining it. Well, you're not wrong about that, Yesod. Then there was a flashback that followed the one from Malkuth's side of it. While Gebura and Bainar's team were fighting each other, where Gebura wanted to make sure that Bainar was dead at this time, Bainar knew she wouldn't be able to stop all of those loyal to Malkuth. So Angela decided to level the playing field by using Chessa's authority to override the equip of deterrence. It was being lowered, which resulted in all the abnormalities being released. Malkuth took charge of the command team and took charge of the situation as a consequence of that. Hockmer took charge of the architecture team, as Ian was no longer there, in order to stop Angela from taking over everything. Gebura took charge of the disciplinary team, and were assigned to beat the out of Bainar, which she gladly did. She had a big nasty sword, and she was not afraid to use it. Hode and her training team would provide the employees with the right manual and information. Seriously? Is that the best task that you could assign her with during this internal struggle? Nezhak and the safety team focused on treating the wounded. What had they come to? Getting a junkie to treat the wounded. Well, it's better than fighting. Yesod and his information team identified the weaknesses of the escaping abnormalities. Chesed and the welfare team would work on restoring Qriphoth deterrence as soon as possible. Why wasn't there a failsafe to make sure that no one individual had control over that? I mean, the coffee addict wasn't too bad, but Angela? I mean, it wasn't his fault, as it was Angela who used it. I mean, his moral standing can't be held hostage by her actions. She's not even following the script this time. As for Tibref and her central command team, it was to support everyone. As for Bainar, she's more or less said, "Bring it on, let's see what you've got." Yesod didn't think that she'd ever understand how they didn't let her snuff out the light without a fight, the desperate situation, and the guilt from compromising with her. All Roland cared about was helping Angela and achieving her goal. Yesod didn't like this, as he sees him as no different from Angela, seeing that the ends justify the means, caring only about themselves. Yesod was disgusted by this, seeing him as typical of someone that lives in the city, a textbook example of the disease of the mind. All that mattered to him was the effects, but not the cause, where the technologies of the city are used for convenience, but the sacrifices, he either didn't know about them or didn't care. Probably both. Certainly concerning what was needed to create those technologies. Roland was mocking of the dreamers and snobs for considering that he should value the process more than the results. As for the reason why they used the singularities without knowing how they really worked, there's no other choice. I mean, what's the expression? If you don't have to compete, you don't have to care? The corporates have hidden so much. The consumers just said, it. They're never going to be open with us. They've got their own problems. Yesod made it clear that he wasn't going to ignore reality, nor would he conform to it. Just as Roland made it clear that he wasn't going to question what should be questioned more. Their mindsets were like cesium and water in a glass container. They don't go together, and if they came into contact, it'd end up with an explosion. It was at this point Roland left the floor. Next we have the Stray Dogs. They're an independent syndicate operating in District 22. That's V Corp territory. They deal in black marketeering in harvested organs, along with other illicit dealings, and are known to be intimidating. Unlike among fixers, who would leave their comrades for dead, if it meant their own survival, syndicates are more closely bonded and are more loyal to each other. They often use rats, as mentioned earlier, to go and carry out the tasks that they couldn't be bothered to do themselves. Those that impress the stray dogs enough may earn themselves a position within their syndicates. Those that made it, they get whatever workshop equipment they could afford, along with the first of their tattoos. You might think that it's an initiation rite. And also in some places, tattoos are associated with criminals. Which is true in this case, but they're not just for show. They're actually nano-tattoos that enhance strength and durability. It's considered one of the cleanest augmentation procedures, and relatively cheap to do. Apparently there used to be a singularity, likely from a fallen wing, but the patent expired, so it was made available to supply for whoever could afford the equipment and those that there was a demand for it. And believe me, there's always those that have a demand for it. I mean, strength and durability. Who wouldn't want that in such a dangerous environment? Oh yes, as for the major players of this syndicate, first we have their leader, Yong Mi. Me. I doubt that he's that big and strong due to the nano tattoos alone. He probably used chemicals as well. All he needs is a luchador mask and he'll be a Korean version of Bane, or Pamyor in Korean. He certainly had the aggression as well, based on what happened in the story. Well, something made him prone to violent outbursts, both vocal and physical. He also wears some accessories, which, like the tattoos, are not just for show. For example, he had a ring that allowed for stronger punches. But it's not always without side effects, as it chafed the skin on his hand. And that's with the tattoos augmenting his durability. This was due to him using it a lot without adequate maintenance. Other examples include a belt that choked the one it was used on, and a necklace that, while it can benefit the wearer, if chosen poorly, can snap the wearer's neck. He understands enough about equipment But to minimize the side effects, you gotta pay a lot at the right workshop. He lets those he's up against think that it's just for show, as it lowers their guard. Then he pounds into them so hard you'd think he'd be working in a restaurant. Well, that's basically how he speaks during his over-enthusiastic beatdown sessions. Well, aside from the accent, of course. I was just speaking like that just to get the point across. Next we have Dino. He's one of the more level-headed of these stray dogs. He also understands what is clean and what has unwanted side effects. He tried the tattoos because young me pressured him into it. He even appeared to take the time into researching the origin of what made that tattoo possible. It certainly indicated that wings had fallen more than once, some due to attracting a powerful abnormality, some due to attracting the wrong kind of attention, such as the head, for example, and some destroyed themselves. Now, I doubt that Dino knows that, but he understands that if you want quality and indeed honesty, it involved money. As if it was done too cheaply, let's just say that melted flesh might be one of the harmful side effects. He's certainly one of the higher-ups in that syndicate that at least tries to stop their leader from going too far with his reprisals. Yeah, they can be excessive. That much I will say about it. Yeah, it might be the thug life, but they need to have some standards. As for the last of the named members of the Stray Dogs Syndicate, it's Zulu. He's another that's more level-headed, either due to having not as many tattoos, or because he didn't use chemicals on top of that. He understood that even if you went as far as the Syndicate, there's always someone above that orders you around. None can surpass the Five Fingers. The top of the pile. In fact, the one thing that syndicates and fixers have in common is that they take orders from those above them. So it's better in the long run to maintain what is already there than letting ambition or greed take over. Well, that's how Zulu sees it. And I can see why, as if they're seen as a threat, those above them will take measures to remove that threat. Yeah, these dogs would likely end up in the... Oh, I'm doing it again, aren't I? Well, they'd be dead, likely in a way that serves as a warning to others. It can be seen as a chain of harm, or as a certain fictional Regency butler would put it, the abused always kick downwards. Yeah. Not someone you'd be... In fact, not a group of people that he'd want to be that close with, considering how volatile they could be. As for the story, Gyeongmi was in the middle of pummeling someone in the back streets, emphasizing each word as he punched them. Dino advised him to stop as nothing was gained from beating them to death, advising against attracting the stronger members of the Zwei Association. Right. Now, here's a question. Why would the leader of the stray dogs beat the out of Zwei fixers? Well, whatever the reason, Dino didn't want to attract unwanted attention. It turned out that Walter, the director of Zwei Association South Section 6, made a deal with him. Something about the floor plan of L-Corp's nest. As a director within the association, he should know better than to make deals with syndicates. Sadly, in this case, it wasn't his fault, as how was he supposed to know that he was going to be turned into a book? How were any of them supposed to know? Gyeongmi certainly didn't. So he decided to take out his frustrations on the fixers of Section 6. Well, at least the southern part of it anyway. Decimating their ranks even further. Let us just say that the Zwei Association will need to go on a recruitment drive. That floor plan is likely for someone above them that needed to have that, well, it's possibly the thumb, as they were mentioned. Yeah, one of the fingers. Dino warned about nice falling, which was when the sweepers, the ordeal that appeared within the facility and the Botany Corporation, I mean, even they would think twice before taking them on. Apparently, the deal was that they gather info on the distortion phenomenon, and Gyeongmi gets the floor plan of L-Corp's nest. And that information on the distortion phenomenon wasn't without a price in blood, since more than half of them were killed by the Church of Gears. Not exactly a canard-level threat, as their leader was described as an inhuman freak. I mean, the rats were afraid of reprisals from the stray dogs, and the thumb, they were now mentioned. And apparently, they don't tolerate failure. Those that fail in their assigned task, they get purged. Well, at least they're the kind that gets it over with, by how that was described. As for what Zulu thought about this, yeah, haven't forgotten about him. He considered Walter to be sensible, as in willing to work with them. He suspected that something might have happened to him. He understood enough about him to know that he wouldn't attend to something personally without a good reason. He'd usually send others to do field jobs, and likely take the credit. Well, Dino understood that much, but as they were talking, yeah, much to Dino's mild annoyance, young me killed all the Zwei fixers that was there. Going into such a blind rage, he might as well turn green and speak in simple sentences. He certainly killed them all in a messy way. Messy enough to attract at least Section 3, perhaps Section 2 of the Zwei Association, as almost wiping out Section 6. It's nothing for them to ignore. It's also not good business. Thankfully, he had a backup plan. An invitation to the library. Much to the relief of both Dino and Zulu. Although Zulu was also a little annoyed that he already knew that Walter was dead and still pulverized the Zwei fixers just to send a message. Yeah, to send a message. It'll send a message all right. A message to send their strongest fixers to shove their Zweihanders up your ears. After viewing this, Roland and Angela discussed this, where according to Roland, syndicates had a tendency to kill more than they needed to, unlike fixers. They did what they did simply because they wanted to. He questioned why they were getting sweepers and the thumb involved. That is a good question. Why are they getting involved? That's what I want to know. Neither of which are good attention. As for what Angela thinks of this, Angela is aware of the sweepers, those that tear humans apart to use them as fuel. Well, they were welcome to try in the facility. Numbers were on the side of those against them. Yeah. As for what Roland sees this, well, he can confirm this partially as one sweeper was tough with workshop gear. But they're actually quite organised, feasting on the dead within the back streets every night. It doesn't matter how many are killed, as they somehow replenish their numbers by the next night. They're certainly not natural. That much is clear. Yeah, the question is, where did they come from? That is a question that won't be answered here, in this reception. Upon arrival, Dino was worried about how long they'd be in the library, seeing as the thumb will not be so patient with them. Zulu was confident that they would arrive back in time. Then they were greeted politely by Angela. Gyong Mi was rude to her and told her to let them in as they were short on time. Angela noted his impatience. He then told her to shut up. She then let them in with some irritation. Yeah, you thought that Roland wasn't hole. At least he has some social skills, unlike that world's anger management therapist nightmare. As for what happened to them, let us just say that they wouldn't need to be worrying about the thumb purging them. Roland then asked if it was annoying, and no, it wasn't his silly chirping as Angela would put it. It was dealing with what some guests would say to her, such as what Gyeong-mi said to her. I mean, some lack even common decency. Roland was surprised that she could withstand their harsh words, and considering what she's been through so far, I'm surprised as well. Apparently, Angela has a similar stance regarding etiquette and protocol as C-3PO, that guests should be treated accordingly. That, and she gets that a lot. She's quite professional. Even when she shouldn't be. Although Roland jokes about her lecturing on hospitality to the restaurant owners in the back streets. Good luck with that. They probably have aggressive ways of dealing with unsatisfied customers. Although he was serious when he advised her to be more flexible with greeting guests, as not all will react to a polite attitude well. Yeah, good advice, Roland. The last few guests and/or abnormalities are to conclude the urban legend section. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!